beyond compare.
Exploring Fab 4 rarities with Beatles expert Tom Frangione.
On the Beatles channel.
Stepping
Chaco Canyon is a sacred and deeply personal place for many indigenous peoples throughout the Southwest. If you visit there, you must visit it with respect. There are many theories attempting to answer the question of what were the buildings that you find in Chaco Canyon used for. The attempts to find the answer are many, but none are fully agreed upon. Our ideas of what the buildings were used for have changed over time. Today, many believe that the great houses were public buildings and centers for ceremonies, trading, and administrative activities. Others argue that the buildings were living spaces. When you visit this site, the first thing that struck me were the large timbers that were still intact, and where did they come from? Researchers at the University of Arizona recently completed strontium testing of the fir and spruce beams used for the roofs and some of the great houses. Plants absorb the element strontium in relationship to how much strontium is in the soil. By taking samples from beams and matching them with soil samples, the beams in Chaco were primarily sourced in the Chusca Mountains and the San Mateo Mountains. They are both approximately 60 to 70 miles away. Many circular round rooms can be found at the Chaco Canyon site. The round rooms are kivas, or ceremonial rooms. The Chacoans constructed two types of kivas, great kivas and clan kivas. Great kivas, such as a casa rocanada, typically contain benches, niches, floor vaults, a fine fire hearth, and a north-oriented doorway, and may have been used for community or regional gatherings with hundreds of participants. Smaller clan kivas may have served as ceremonial rooms for separate clans or religious societies. Kivas were multi-purpose rooms used by men and women for different kinds of ceremonies, including preparation, dance, prayer vigils, and other types of social events. And here's one thing to ponder if you go there and view everything. Some of the structures that were built there were built in 5 stories of rooms. In the Western world, until after the Civil War, no building could be built more than 4 or 5 stories because at that time the concept of using concrete for a compressive load and iron hadn't been invented or utilized. So these people, 1,000 years before, were building buildings as high as we were, or the Western world was able to build up until after the Civil War. When you walk through and visit the buildings and at the sites where all the rooms were, the first thing you'll be struck with is that a lot of the doorway heights are very low. The average height of a Chacoan man was approximately 5 feet 5 inches. The doorways are even shorter from this height. Smaller doors are easier to place a slab over and seal up. They are more stable for building multi-stories. So therefore, the theory is that there was a structural reason for having short doorways. And the other possibility is that the doorways, being kept small, were done that way for heat retention and as well as for defensive purposes. Chaco Canyon National Historical Park is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's located in northwest New Mexico. It is home to the ruins of a complex network of ancient Pueblan settlements, including the largest and the most well-preserved great houses in the Southwest. The park is a very popular tourist destination, attracting over 250,000 visitors each year. One of the things that crossed my mind when I visited this site was when did it get excavated and what did it look like before? Typically, the unexcavated sites look like large mounds of sand and fill with the tops of the walls only sticking up. Una Vida behind the visitor center is an example of an unexcavated great house. There are numerous locations where there are buried sites that still haven't been excavated there. And when you go there and you see how spectacular the sites are that have been excavated, it just really overwhelms you to imagine what was there in total. The next thing you'd think about, at least what I thought about, was at a lot of archaeological sites I've visited, there's been reconstructions done. Sometimes you're looking at almost in total reconstruction. But at this site, typically only the top foot of the buildings have been reconstructed or capped to prevent erosion. The wood beams are generally original, and if one sees a small circular plug where a tree ring sample was taken, in other words, and there's pictures on this video, you'll see these little plugs, and they take those tree ring samples to date. They use this mechanism now with dating tree rings, and that's how they've dated this site. There is a preservation crew that maintains and stabilizes the buildings, but they don't reconstruct them. The next question we have to ask is, where did the Chacoans get their water and food? The Chacoans found and created a number of opportunities to get water. There are a few seeps and springs in the box canyons. It has been also thought that they modified natural drainage areas into canals to channel water into fields. This is very similar to what the Incas did way up in the higher elevations to channel water. They built many water control devices in the canyon, including catch basins and diversion dams. Since some geologists believe the water table is only about 3 feet beneath the surface at the time when the Chaco culture flourished, it is also possible they created wells by digging in the wash areas. Chacoan people took advantage of the native plants, including beeweed, pinyon onions, rice grass, cactus fruit, etc. They also grew corn, beans, and squash in the canyon. Some archaeologists now believe that agricultural goods were also imported. Meat sources included turkeys, rabbits, and larger game, such as antelope and deer. And regarding animals, a number of parrot skeletons have been identified, and as far as the animals and kept as domestic creatures, whether they were pets or not, who knows? I know it's been believed that the feathers were used, but the parrots came from South America, and that meant this culture had communication and trade with South America. Now the big question is, where did they come from and where did they go? In the sophistication of their civilization, their buildings, and their agriculture, it appears that they sprung up almost from nowhere, although there's been archaeological sites that have created a continuum of different cultures. In the earlier culture, they called the basket weaving culture before ceramics. But it's very cloudy where these people came from suddenly to be able to do the architecture they did and the perfection of the walls. I don't know if you've seen in the videos, but I tried to capture how straight, a 200 or 300 foot long wall was, 1,000 years old. But these people knew what they were doing when they were building this stuff. They didn't come out of the woods and do this. And the other question, the follow-up, is what happened to them? Mainstream archaeology says they did not suddenly vanish. Though they were not exactly sure why they left, possibilities as far as archaeology says include drought, resource depletion, social, religious, political collapse, time to move on, combination of these factors. In the 13th century, there were migrations to the south and east and west. Today, the 19 Pueblan tribes in New Mexico, as well as the Hopi in Arizona, claim Chaco as their ancestral homeland and are tied to this place through oral traditions and clan lineages. A number of Navajo clans also are affiliated with the Chacoan sites through their traditional stories. However, one of the things that struck me of this site and a few of the other sites, I think it was the Aztec ruins, which is a misnomer. It has nothing to do with Aztec. It's another Chacoan site north of there. One of the things that was very bizarre was when they excavated, they found food storage, because a lot of those rooms you're seeing in these buildings were storing food. They stored copious amounts of food, quite like the Egyptians did, so they could bad years, drought years, or whatever, they had always had a strong supply of food. Well, when they excavated this site and also the other site, they found large amounts of food left there. Now, the theory is, there was a drought, they couldn't grow food. Well, what are they doing leaving all that food there? It doesn't make sense. But I think that's a question that still has to be answered about this site. Very mysterious. Now, when this site was excavated and the enormity of the site was realized, the artifacts were moved. Chacoan artifacts are located all around the world. The largest collections are located at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. Not in New Mexico, in New York City. The Museum of Natural History at the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, and the Chaco collections at the University of New Mexico. So they're spread all over. I think this was overwhelming in terms of culture and archaeology, and it was moved all around in its discovery. So there are a lot of places you can go around this country and see some of the artifacts that came out of this amazing culture. Okay, now I'm going to end with some amazing facts and mysteries of this archaeological site in this civilization. It was a flourishing civilization. Chaco Canyon was the center of a very complex civilization between 850 and 1150 AD, more than 1,000 years ago. It had monumental architecture. The ancestral Pueblans built massive stone structures known as great houses. Some of them reached 5 stories high. The construction indicated advanced engineering, and they also created sophisticated road networks. Some of the roads stretched over 40 miles. The astronomical significance was indicated through the alignment of the buildings and structures, which suggested a very deep understanding of celestial cycles. A trade network was definitely there. Chaco was a hub for trade with goods like turquoise, obsidian, and shells coming from distant regions. And as I mentioned, there was parrots there, so they traded all the way to South America. The ceremonial center was in the canyon, served as a significant religious and ceremonial action and place. Well, here's what we don't know. We don't know the purpose of those great houses. While theories abound, the exact function of these massive structures are still a mystery. We don't know much about the decline of the civilization. The reasons for the abrupt abandonment of Chaco Canyon are still debated and argued. And the role of religion and spirituality. While evidence suggests a strong spiritual connection to the land and cosmos, the specific beliefs and practices are still unclear. The nature of the road network, the purpose and extent of the road systems are still being studied. The social and political structure. It was a very complex society, and it was organized and governed in order to achieve what they did, with literally thousands of people working harmoniously, and it remains a subject of ongoing research. Astrological alignments, the water management, the social and economic factors, all of that stuff is still under question and under investigation. This is a great place to visit if you want to really expand your mind and discover an area, at least it was for me, that the Native Americans, way long time ago, had a very sophisticated culture, and they weren't as quite often portrayed merely hunter-gatherers living in teepees. Okay, now I'm on the way home. As you notice, I'm driving on a nice paved road. It's all part of the national park. But as soon as the national park ends, boom, the road disappears. At least the pavement does. And it turns to bumpy gravel. This is a pretty straight stretch. It's not too bad, but if you notice, there's ruts in it. But it gets worse. And the vibration when you're driving of your car. That was a brand new car I had too, and there's the ruts, and you can see the deep ruts that are there where somebody drove through when it was wet. You don't want to go here if it's raining or it rained significantly a few days before, because I'll tell you, you won't pass on that road because there's a couple of deep culverts you have to pass through where the water passes, and it's very bad. Okay, I came in from the north side into the park, and it's real funny because the rangers said that's the easiest way to get in. It's the most smoothest, but it was brutal. Okay, coming on that deep culvert here. It doesn't look very deep, but it is, and it washes out. And if it's rained recently, chances are, you see that it's paved. Last year I tried to go here and it wasn't, because it was washed away. But anyway, there's a beautiful sunset, and then there's some free range cattle I said hi to.